Welcome back to the Sensible Mama podcast. I am Paulina Westcott, mom of two, a birth doula, and otherwise just a woman who is obsessed with the subject of birth, pregnancy, and everything related. Today I wanted to talk to you guys about the story of how I fired my medical OB team when I was 8 months pregnant and decided to change course completely and have a home birth instead. So, without any further ado, I'm going to jump right into the story. I have some notes so that I don't forget some of the things on the timeline. But I think it's worth sharing. I hope that you guys find it at least entertaining, and hopefully more than that, hopefully it's informative and maybe even inspiring to another mama out there who is maybe going through something similar, because I know my story is not isolated. So, here we go. So I was 8 months pregnant when I made this decision. Going back in my pregnancy, it was very uneventful, which I know is not everyone's story. For me, it was, and I'm very grateful for that. It was very smooth. You know, my appointments, I was going to an obstetrician that was affiliated with Yale Hospital. I'm here in Connecticut. And, you know, when I made that decision, it was really just my best friend had had her baby at Yale and her experience was fine. And so I was like, cool, I guess that's what I'm going to do too. That was the extent of thought that I had put into this decision. In the back of my mind, even before I was pregnant, the idea of a home birth had flickered here and there. And I was like, don't be crazy, right? Like, you don't want to do something crazy. Like, why would you do that? Everybody has their first baby at least in a hospital. If it goes smoothly, then maybe we can talk about a home birth. This is all what's going on inside my head, right? But let's not be crazy here. Just go to the hospital. What if something major happens? What if there's a medical emergency? You don't want to not be in a hospital, right? Like, so all the usual sort of thoughts. And I don't like hospitals. I'm not a particularly medically inclined person. When something is wrong with my body, I don't automatically reach into, you know, the medical cabinet, you know, the drug cabinet or whatever. I don't have one in my house. I don't have Tylenol or aspirin or Benadryl or whatever usual medications people have in their houses. The way that I was raised was, I guess, kind of crunchy granola. Not because my mom is like particularly crunchy or granola, but because I was born in Russia and where we lived, it's not like you had a CVS on every corner at that time. You used the medicine that was available to you, and that medicine usually was like honey and ginger and, you know, various natural, what we call crunchy remedies. Anyway, so that's just how I was raised. And that's my outlook. You know, if I have a headache, I remember one time I was working for a software company and I came into work and it was like a super hot day and I knew I was dehydrated and I was like, all messed up. My head was hurting. It wasn't quite a migraine, but almost. And my boss is like, come to my office. I've got whatever, some kind of aspirin, Tylenol, some Motrin, probably Motrin. And I was like, nah, I'm good. And she looked at me like I had 9 heads. Like, why would you decline a medication when you're clearly in pain? And I was like, I just need to drink more water. I don't know, like take some electrolytes, maybe sleep. It'll be fine. That's just how I am. I don't know. So all that being said, I don't particularly like to spend a lot of time in hospitals if I can avoid it. They like to do a lot of medical interventions no matter what you come in with. They are poking you, prodding you, injecting something into you, giving you some sort of medication. It's just not my vibe. I don't know. Maybe it's some people's thing. It's not my thing. So, I was kind of begrudgingly like, okay, I'm going to go to the hospital, have as natural a birth as possible in the hospital, and then get out and carry on with, you know, this lifestyle of mine. So, the appointments at the OB office were very uninteresting. I would arrive, you know, sign in, pee in a cup, which they would test for whatever they would test it for. And they would check my blood pressure, they would measure my belly, ask me how I was feeling, push some sort of vaccine that I would decline. Oh, and this was also in the middle of COVID, which the COVID vaccine was being pushed, which is a whole nother freaking story, because I was like, it's brand new. Aside from the fact that I don't do medications, I don't do medical interventions anyway, I am certainly not doing this one because A, it's brand new, B, I'm pregnant, and I'm sure it hasn't been tested on pregnant people. C, even if it had been, I don't know if I trust the tests. And D, I have a baby in me that I'm not willing to put into harm's way with some unknown medication. My body and my baby are not used to any medications, anything, not even frickin' Benadryl or Tylenol. Like, I'm not, no. So that was a fight almost every time, which I think finally they gave up on after so many appointments of me being like, stop asking. The answer's not going to change. Anyway, I'd leave, nothing happened. They were like, great, baby's measuring fine, he's head down, he's got all his arms and legs, everything is great. Okay, good. So boring pregnancy is a good pregnancy, the way I see it. You know, I had the usual symptoms or whatever. I remember I had like pretty bad sciatic pain, which I was dealing with, and you know, toward later in the pregnancy I was having trouble finding a comfortable position to sleep in and whatever. But it was fine. So the facility itself was fine, it was clean, the staff were nice enough when they weren't irritated with me for declining things. It was fine, it was good. Heartbeat was always spot on. His heartbeat was, man, I miss listening to the little heartbeat. That was like the best part of the visits, was being able to hear that little da-dum, da-dum, you know. Anyway, so then it was November. I was just about 8 months, a little shy of 8 months pregnant, and they started talking about the gestational diabetes test. So if you've done the test, then you know how it goes. If you haven't done the test, I compare it to being hit by a Mack truck. It was the single worst day of my entire pregnancy. I don't think I had ever felt so sick as I did when I had to do the 3-hour glucose test. They give you this awful liquid, gunk, goop that tastes like death. You drink it, your body goes into shock because nobody, not even somebody who eats a lot of sugar, nobody eats that much, you know, glucose in one sitting. Your body goes, what the am I supposed to do with this? Freaks out. You feel like crap. They take your blood, and then on top of that, you know, you're getting stabbed repeatedly so that this vampire can take your blood. The vampire was nice. She was a sweetheart. Nothing against her. She was doing her job. But still not the best. It's not the most fun day of my life. And the test comes back inconclusive. And I'm like, oh, okay, what does that mean? Well, you didn't fail, but you also didn't pass. Okay. And then began the beginning of the end, where I was like, okay, cool. Educate me. Teach me. What's happening here? What do the numbers mean? Why did my body react this way? How is it supposed to react? What if I did this? What if I try that? Can I do this instead? And it began a conversation. In my opinion, I thought it was just a conversation. Apparently, they saw me as a total pest, a complete nuisance. How dare I question their standard protocols? Why can't you just do as you're told? You are falling out of line and we don't like it. And that was the attitude and I kind of started feeling like that was the attitude of the whole office. Because the conversations kept going like this no matter which provider I spoke with. And I was like, oh boy, I'm becoming that mom, you know? And I was like, I just need to understand, because now they're talking about early induction. And I'm like, whoa. Why are we trying to evict my baby? If it needs to happen, then I'm down. But you need to convince me that this is the right thing to do. And you're going to convince me not by saying, because I said so, because I don't know about you, but that doesn't really work great on me. I need to be educated. You need to inform me, like actually inform me. Why is this the best decision for me right now in my given circumstance. And there were a couple of things that resembled normal conversations, but I wasn't convinced. And I wasn't going to pretend to be convinced when I wasn't. And so I was adamant about more information and different alternatives and why the induction. And it was like, well, you're going to have a big baby. And I'm like, of course I'm going to have a big baby. Like, my husband's not exactly a small dude, you know. I was born pretty big. Like, I don't know, I'm not like a massive beast of a person, but like, I'm not teeny tiny either. I wrote this down somewhere, but when I was born, I was 9 pounds, 2 ounces. I had to convert it from, you know, Russia doesn't use pounds. So I was 9 pounds, 2 ounces. My husband was 9 pounds, 8 ounces when he was born. So I'm like, it would make sense if my kid is between 9 and 10 pounds when he's born. Like, I'm ready for this. I'm okay. I've made my peace with the fact that I'm probably going to have a big baby. It's cool. Okay. Like, am I excited about it? Not necessarily, but I'm also not afraid of it. Stop trying to make me scared of something of which I'm not scared. And it finally just got to constant conversations where the vibe was, why don't you just shut up and do as you're told? And the more that vibe was put out, the more I like resisted it. You know, like I had like a little bit of a wall up that probably with a couple of conversations could have been melted away. But the more that they pushed that line on me or that attitude, the more I pushed back. And I'm sure that I'm not the only one that has experienced this. In retrospect, I would have done things very differently now that I know what I know. But at that time, I was like, stop. Like, this needs to stop. It's not doing it for me. And so there was, you know, and there were a couple of other things going on at the same time. I remember it was toward the end of like COVID shenanigans. And so at Yale Hospital, they had rules. And I remember them talking to me about, oh, when you're in labor, you're going to have a mask on. And I was like, oh, I don't think so. I haven't been in labor yet, but I'm pretty sure I'm not going to be cool with that. And they were like, well, maybe depending on if you have a cool doctor or not, they might let you get away with it. And I'm like, I'm not having that fight while I'm pushing a baby out of my vagina. No, thank you. If I want a mask on, I'll have a mask on. And if I don't, I won't. And if somebody has a problem with that, it's not something I want to deal with when I'm in the thick of labor. And then on top of that, they had rules with regards to you had to get tested for COVID, which I had my own disagreements with, which I won't get into all of them. But the main thing was my husband had to be tested for COVID before he was allowed into the labor and delivery area. But at that time, there were a lot of false positives, and like a common cold was testing positive on some of these tests. Like, it was like ridiculous. And so I was like, the chances of a false positive are pretty high. And to be quite honest, even if he does have COVID, I had already, I think by that time, probably had it. I never got tested, but everybody else got tested. They got COVID, and I had the same thing. I was like out for a week, somewhere 7 months or so into my pregnancy. And I was like, I'm not afraid. Stop trying to make me scared of things of which I'm not scared. Like, this was like a repeating theme. And so anyway, the idea of any chance of my husband not being there with me while I was in labor was enough to make me go crazy. And I was like, there's no way. And so all of these things were compounding, right? You got to wear a mask in labor, this whole COVID test stuff, how many visitors you can or cannot have, how many people can be in the room with you or whatever. And finally, this glucose test thing, and there was one phone call. I remember it so well. I was sitting in my office at home. I was working from home. I was sitting on my yoga ball. And it was like lunchtime, and I got a call from the OB office, and it was just more of the same. You have to, and why haven't you, and you didn't set your appointment for such and so yet. And I was like, and I finally, and okay, to be fair, I was also like 8 months pregnant, and the hormones at that point are like, right? And I was like, enough. I'm not doing it just because you said so. And so then this nurse, I don't know, poor woman probably was just having a bad day, and I happened to be the last person she had to talk to or whatever. And she goes, if you don't do exactly as we say, we will have no choice but to drop you as our patient. And I was like, first of all, I'm not a patient. I'm not sick. I'm pregnant. That's not an illness. Second of all, I will save you the trouble and I will fire you instead. Goodbye. Send me my medical records. And I hung up and I was like, oh no, what did I just do? And so I'm like shaking, crying, right? Hormonal disaster. Now it's hilarious. At the time it was anything but funny. And I called my husband in the middle of the workday, which I had never used to do. And he answers. He's like, what's happening? Because obviously he knows that I'm at the end of my pregnancy. So he answers the phone. He's like, what's going on? And I'm a ball of tears, just a disaster. And he goes, what is happening? And I said, I don't like the way I'm being treated. I'm not okay with how things are going. I don't want to have our baby at Yale. I want to do a home birth. Help. And he goes, great, let's do it. You've been thinking about it on and off this whole time. What do you need from me? Let's go. Let's make this happen. And I had been kind of expecting him to be like, why don't you call the OB and apologize? And he just had my back 1,000%. And I was like, okay, we're in. Let's do this, you know. I found a midwife that I liked that was willing to take me that late in my pregnancy. And I just dove headfirst into research, preparation. You know, I started getting all of my supplies together, which if you are planning a home birth or considering a home birth, I'll put a link in the description of my supply list for a home birth, and also how to interview midwives, like a list of questions. What do you even ask to find out? Anyway, so we had a whirlwind of a last month of pregnancy, and it was also right in the thick of, you know, Christmas time, and December was a wild month. And it was scary in the sense that it was unknown, but it was thrilling in the sense that I felt so empowered. My visits with my midwife were an hour long. You know, I still had to pee in the cup, which is great. I don't care about peeing in a cup, but she would answer all my questions. And she wasn't like, you do this because I said so. And I was like, what if I want to do that and not this? She goes, well, you can do that, but you have to keep in mind. And she would take the time to educate me, and she would send me resources and, you know, articles on the things that I was asking about. And I was like, well, she's like, okay, now there's this test. And I was like, am I allowed to decline it? She goes, you're allowed to decline anything you want. And I was like, what? Like, it was like, I mean, I don't know, maybe this is an extreme comparison, but it was like getting out of an abusive relationship where I was like, I didn't know this kind of freedom and empowerment were possible, you know, when it came to my pregnancy and my birth and my experience. And it was wonderful. And my labor, I went into labor the morning of my 30th birthday. I woke up very early in the morning with a very strong contraction. I was like, happy birthday. This is what we're doing today. And it was wild, and it was 23 hours of labor, so it's not like it was like super easy peasy, and required some real work and strength and dedication and a really solid team to make it happen. But I had such a wonderful experience. It was so moving and so powerful and so calm. Like, there was no panic, there was no anxiety. There were moments where I was like, I don't think I can do this anymore, I quit. And so, you know, like my midwife's birth assistant was there, and she kind of put on her doula hat, and she was like, you gotta go, you gotta get through this, we got this. She helped me through that little hurdle. My kid was positioned a little funky. He was like, instead of being like fully straight down, he was like off a little bit and trying to come out through my thigh. So we had to do some position changes and some techniques to get him kind of shuffled over into the right position. And there were challenges. I'm not saying it was easy. It wasn't easy, but it was amazing. And obviously I have no way of knowing this for sure, but I suspect, given how long I was pushing, given my attitude during transition, where I was just completely ready to give up, probably had I been in the hospital and a nurse had come over to me and started pushing an epidural or, a C-section, in that moment, I may have given into that in the hospital setting. At home, that wasn't an option. And I was already in it to win it. You know what I mean? Like, I was like, we're already home. What am I going to do? Transfer to the hospital and go get a C-section? Or am I going to push through? And had it been an actual medical emergency, my team would have rushed me to the hospital. That was always an option on the table, as it is with any home birth. But it was a last resort. You know what I mean? It wasn't just a fallback that was a convenient or an easy way out. It was there in case of an actual true emergency, which I didn't have. And I had challenges, but they weren't emergencies. And that's one of the differences, and in a hospital setting, a lot of the time a challenge is treated as an emergency. And I think that's a mistake sometimes. Anyway, more on that in a different episode. The point is, I had my baby on my living room floor. I did a lot of laboring in the birth pool, which was amazing, but ultimately I needed gravity to help me get him out. And he came out, and then there was such peace. It was so calm. It was so beautiful. It was so wonderful. I was sitting on the couch with my perfect little alien, cone head baby. He spent a long time in the birth canal, so his head was like bloop. And we just snuggled for like more than an hour. And my husband sat on the couch next to me, eating his bowl of cereal and just chit-chatting with me and my baby. And it was so beautiful, while the midwife and her assistant, they were doing everything to clean up. I had food brought to me. I was taken care of. I wasn't prodded and poked, and nobody came to wake me up every couple hours. I got to sleep. I could have slept in my own bed. We ended up sleeping on the couch because I was just more comfortable down there. But it was so beautiful. And it was not medical. And it doesn't have to be medical. There are times where there is an actual medical emergency or an actual medical situation where you better have a medical team there and you need the medical intervention. But if it's not necessary, it's so nice to not have to have it. I wasn't fighting away people. Nobody told me to wear a mask. Nobody had to get, stabbed for some reason, random IV ports. I could wear whatever I wanted. I could labor in the pool, whatever. It was so freeing. It was so beautiful. And so my parting message at the end of this story is, I know home birth is not for everyone, and that's okay. I'm not gonna sit here and tell you that you should have a home birth because I don't know you. I don't know your story. I don't know your circumstances or your desires or your fears or anything. But what I do know is that your instincts are very strong. Your sense of being in control is very important, and it's never too late to change your plan. If you have red flags, weird vibes, things that are just not making you feel good, even if you're 8 months into your pregnancy like I was, it's not too late to regain control, and it's well worth it, because this is an important experience in your life. It's not just a regular, Wednesday. It's a significant story that you will carry with you for the rest of your life. Your birth story matters. And it is worth protecting and preemptively removing any potential sources of trauma, anxiety, fear. You can have a beautiful experience. I know that with certainty. And my hope is that something in the work that I do can help inspire a mama to put her hands back on the steering wheel and guide her birth story in a direction that is positive and beautiful and empowering. And I hope that I can do that If you think that this story resonates with you, or if you think that there's a mama out there that would benefit from hearing it, please share this video with a mama that might need to hear this today. I know I've spoken to so many women, pregnant women who have already, had their babies. I know I'm not alone in these kinds of experiences. Maybe your story is a little different, but the flavor may be the same. Anyway, I hope that helps. I hope that gives you something to think about, and I will see you guys in the next episode. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you soon.